What if the greatest power in the galaxy was never meant to be controlled? And every Star Wars war began the moment someone tried. That question defines Star Wars itself. The Force isn't a weapon or a prize. It's a living current that connects all life. When fear, greed, or obsession twist it, the galaxy doesn't just suffer. It pushes back. This is the story of how balance shapes the Force, why imbalance always returns, and why power without restraint never lasts. The Force as a living current, not a tool. From the very beginning, the Force is described as an energy field created by all living things, binding the galaxy together. It is not owned, mined, or manufactured. It is participated in. Those who align themselves with it gain insight, awareness, and sometimes extraordinary abilities. Those who try to dominate it gain something else entirely: short-term power at the cost of long-term ruin. The dark side is not introduced as a separate energy, but as a way of using the Force. Fear, anger, and hatred accelerate power, but they do so by narrowing perception. This is why the dark side feels efficient. It removes doubt. It simplifies the world into enemies and objectives. Balance, however, requires the opposite. It demands patience, empathy, and the discipline to act without surrendering to impulse. In Star Wars, imbalance begins the moment power is treated as something to possess rather than something to serve through. Balance is not equality between light and dark. One of the most persistent misunderstandings in Star Wars is the idea that balance means equal light and equal dark. The canon story repeatedly rejects this. Balance is not a peaceful compromise between good and evil. It is the absence of domination by the dark side. George Lucas himself framed the conflict in moral terms: compassion versus greed. Compassion connects beings to the larger whole. Greed isolates them inside their own fear of loss. The dark side grows when individuals attempt to freeze life in place, clinging to power, relationships, or control, rather than accepting change. Balance is not about erasing darkness from existence. Fear and anger are natural emotions. Balance is about refusing to let those emotions rule action. When they do, the Force becomes distorted and the galaxy begins to fracture. Mortis. When balance became a place. The most literal explanation of balance appears in the Clone Wars through the Mortis arc. Mortis is portrayed as a realm where the Force exists in concentrated form, overseen by three powerful beings. The Father represents balance itself, holding in check two opposing forces embodied by his children. The daughter aligns with the light side while the son embodies the dark. What makes Mortis important is not symbolism alone, but consequence. When the balance maintained there begins to collapse, the effects ripple outward. The message is unmistakable. Unchecked darkness does not remain contained. It spreads, destabilizes, and eventually destroys the system that allows it to exist. The Father's greatest fear is not that the dark side exists, but that it will be unrestrained. Mortis shows balance as an active process, not a static state. It must be maintained. When it fails, catastrophe follows. The Wellspring of Life and the Origins of the Force. In another arc of the Clone Wars, Yoda journeys to an ancient world described as one of the origins of the Force and the source of midi-chlorians. This location, often called the Wellspring of Life, reframes the Force as something both mystical and biological. It is not reduced to science, but it is shown to be intertwined with life at its most fundamental level. This moment is crucial because it reinforces a pattern seen throughout Star Wars. Whenever beings approach the Force with humility, seeking understanding rather than control, revelation follows. Whenever they approach it as a resource to exploit, corruption begins. The Wellspring is not guarded by armies or weapons. It is protected by trial, insight, and self-knowledge. Balance is preserved not through force, but through wisdom. The Chosen One and the galaxy's course correction. The prophecy of the Chosen One remains one of the most debated elements in Star Wars, but canon provides a clear conclusion. Balance is achieved when the Sith are destroyed. This occurs when Anakin Skywalker turns against Darth Sidious. ending the Sith lineage that had dominated the Force for generations. Importantly, balance does not arrive when Anakin becomes Darth Vader. It arrives when he rejects the dark side at the cost of his own life. The Force is not balanced by Anakin's fall, but by his final act of selfless compassion. This reinforces a central theme. Redemption matters because it restores harmony, not because it erases past crimes. The Force responds not to identity, but to intention, how the dark side broke the galaxy. The Sith did not conquer the galaxy through strength alone. They succeeded by reshaping perception. Fear became security. Control became peace. The Jedi, blinded by tradition and overconfidence, failed to recognize how deeply the dark side had clouded the Force. Imbalance in Star Wars is never subtle. Institutions rot from within. Truth becomes obscured. Individuals justify actions they once would have condemned. When balance collapses, the galaxy does not immediately explode, it decays. Palpatine's greatest victory was not military, it was philosophical. He convinced the galaxy that freedom was dangerous and obedience was safety. The Force, distorted by this belief, responded with war. The Jedi Order and the limits of doctrine. While the Jedi represent alignment with the light side, Star Wars does not portray them as infallible. Their strict rules against attachment were designed to prevent fear-driven obsession. But over time, those rules hardened into emotional suppression rather than emotional understanding. Anakin's tragedy was not that he loved, but that he feared loss more than he trusted the Force. The Jedi lacked the flexibility to guide him through that fear, while the Sith weaponized it. Balance in this sense was lost not only because of the Sith, but because the Jedi mistook rigidity for purity. When balance becomes dogma instead of wisdom, it fails. Ach-to and the ancient view of balance. The sequel era returns to the origins of the Jedi through ach-to, the site of the first Jedi Temple. This location suggests that early Force traditions may have been more nuanced than the institutions that followed. The ancient Jedi appear to have understood balance as harmony with the Force rather than dominance over emotion. Luke's exile reflects a crisis of faith not just in the Jedi, but in the idea that institutions alone can preserve balance. By returning to the beginning, Star Wars hints that balance is cyclical. When teachings drift too far from their purpose, the Force demands renewal. The Force as a self-correcting system. Across every era, the same pattern emerges. When the dark side grows unchecked, the Force responds by producing individuals who restore equilibrium. This does not happen through convenience or comfort. It happens through sacrifice. Balance is not passive. It is enforced by consequence. Empires fall, orders collapse, legends are born. The Force does not reward ambition, it rewards alignment. This is why Star Wars never ends. Balance is achieved, lost, and restored again, because living beings continue to struggle with the same fears and desires. The real birth of the Force. The Force does not have a single moment of creation. Its birth is ongoing, renewed each time life emerges and consciousness awakens. What changes is not the Force itself, but how beings choose to interact with it. Every generation faces the same choice, to serve the whole or to serve the self. Balance exists where compassion guides power. Imbalance begins where control replaces understanding. Star Wars endures because it isn't about technology or fantasy politics. It is about restraint in a universe that rewards excess. The Force's true legacy isn't endless war between light and dark. It's the fight to stay balanced in a galaxy obsessed with power. Every fall and every redemption comes down to one choice: fear or compassion. The Force doesn't reward control, it rewards restraint. If this changed how you see Star Wars, you're in the right place. If you want to be smarter every day, like and subscribe.